Willows Creek was the kind of town that seemed untouched by time. Nestled between rolling hills and thick forests, it had a population of just under 6,000, where everyone knew each other by name. The mornings were quiet, the evenings peaceful, and life moved at a gentle, predictable pace. Children played in open fields, couples strolled through the weekly farmers' market, and the most serious crime reported in the last decade had been a few stolen bicycles. It was a place where people didn't lock their doors at night. But beneath that calm exterior, something dark had begun to fester, something the town wasn't ready to face. It began quietly, almost invisibly. A missing poster at the local grocery store. A brief article in the Willows Creek Gazette. A young mother named Hannah Wells, 32 years old, failed to return home after work one rainy Thursday evening. Her car was found abandoned near the edge of the county, keys still in the ignition, purse left untouched on the passenger seat. At first, people assumed she had run away. Maybe she had problems no one knew about. But those who knew Hannah insisted she was happy, devoted to her daughter, hard-working, reliable. The community held candlelight vigils, hoping for her safe return. But weeks passed, and no answers came. Then, just 2 months later, another woman vanished. This time, it was Julia Trent, a 29-year-old single mother of twins. Her disappearance was eerily similar. Last seen at a gas station just off Highway 47. Her phone last pinged near the same area where Hannah's car had been discovered. The similarities couldn't be ignored. Both women were in their late 20s to early 30s. Both were mothers, and both had vanished in the same 2-mile stretch on the outskirts of town. Fear slowly began to seep into daily life. Parents held their children closer, and women stopped going out alone after dark. The sense of safety that had defined Willows Creek began to crumble. The local police launched an investigation but struggled to find leads. There was no sign of struggle, no eyewitnesses, and no evidence of foul play. The media began to speculate about a possible serial predator. But with so little to go on, the town was left with nothing but rumors and growing paranoia. Some believed it was an outsider passing through. Others whispered that the killer might be someone they knew, someone who blended in perfectly with the community. Barbara Mabee Abel had been watching all of this unfold with growing unease. A librarian by profession, she was meticulous, observant, and deeply rooted in the town. She had lived in Willows Creek her entire life, and had raised her 2 children alone after her husband died in a car accident 5 years ago. Life hadn't been easy, but Barbara was resourceful. She found solace in books, comfort in routine, and strength in her children. But when the third woman went missing, a 34-year-old daycare worker named Lena Monroe, Barbara's quiet concern turned into active fear. She couldn't explain it at first, but something didn't sit right with her. It wasn't just the disappearances. It was the silence that followed. The police gave vague updates. The newspapers printed the same recycled phrases, and no one seemed to be connecting the deeper patterns. Barbara, with her love of research and detail, began to piece things together on her own. She started keeping a notebook, jotting down the dates, times, locations, and even weather conditions around each disappearance. She marked the map pinned to her kitchen wall, drawing lines and noting similarities. What she saw chilled her. All 3 women had vanished on a Thursday evening, all within a small 5-mile radius, and all during rainy weather. She noticed something else. Each woman had briefly mentioned in passing, to co-workers or friends, about being followed or feeling watched days before they vanished. These were small details buried in interviews or social media posts, but Barbara took note. She knew that predators often stalked their victims first, learning their routines, waiting for the perfect moment. The thought made her sick. Barbara began retracing the final steps of the victims. She walked the roads where their cars had been, found, visited the gas stations, and spent hours at the library poring through news archives from neighboring towns. One night, she stumbled across an old article from a town called Millstone, located 3 hours away. The headline struck her like a bolt of lightning. Third woman disappears in 6 months. Fear of serial predator grows. The article was dated from 5 years ago. The victims, also single mothers, had vanished under nearly identical circumstances. Same age group, same types of locations, and just like Willows Creek, the town had no suspects, no clues, and no closure. Barbara dug deeper. She searched online. Databases, social media platforms, and local news sites. That's when she found the name Russell Kane. He had been a suspect in Millstone, but was never formally charged. He had worked as a delivery driver back then, and was known to frequent places where the women had last been seen. After the investigation went cold, he moved away, and the disappearances suddenly stopped. That was 5 years ago. Curious and increasingly disturbed, Barbara checked local records. To her horror, she found that a Russell Kane had moved to Willows Creek roughly 7 months ago, just weeks before Hannah Wells went missing. He was working under a new business name, fixing HVAC systems and offering home repair services in the area. No one thought much of it. A friendly, quiet man, always polite, always helpful. Barbara felt her stomach twist into knots. This wasn't just a theory anymore. This was real. She began to wonder, had she seen him before? She went through her mail, flyers, and emails, and there it was. A promotional card from RK Home Repairs, promising affordable, quick fixes. The same logo she had seen on a van parked near the trailhead behind her library 2 weeks earlier. That night, Barbara couldn't sleep. Every creak in the house made her sit up straight. Her children were asleep in the next room, blissfully, unaware of the danger possibly lurking so close. She felt an overwhelming need to act, but didn't know where to begin. The police might dismiss her. She had no solid proof, just patterns, just gut instinct. But in her heart, she knew she was right. Barbara Mabee Abel was a mother, a protector, and she had just realized the predator everyone feared wasn't hiding in shadows anymore. He was living among them, and she was already on his radar. Barbara Mabee Abel had never thought of herself as anything more than a librarian and a mother. She wasn't a detective. She had no formal training in investigations, no connections in law enforcement. But what she did have was a sharp mind, a fierce sense of responsibility, and an intuition that refused to quiet down. The more she uncovered, the more she realized how fragile the illusion of safety really was in Willows Creek. Something terrible had taken root, and it was growing right beneath everyone's noses. After finding the old article from Millstone and tracing Russell Kane's movements, Barbara knew she couldn't dismiss what she had learned. But suspicion alone wasn't enough. She needed evidence, something concrete. The police wouldn't act on hunches, especially from someone without credentials, so she did what she did best. She researched. Every night, after putting her children to bed, she stayed up in the glow of her laptop, sifting through online forums, cold case files, public records, and newspaper clippings. She began building a private file on Russell Kane. His name appeared sporadically over the years, different towns, short stays, always working low-profile jobs that didn't require background checks. It was a pattern. He moved into small communities, stayed just long enough for something to happen, and then disappeared again when suspicion began to rise. He changed business names, but kept the same phone number, which Barbara traced to a burner plan. She even found a message board post from someone in another state who mentioned a creepy handyman named Russ who came to fix a broken lock and then wouldn't stop texting her afterward. That post was dated just weeks before another disappearance in a nearby town. Barbara printed everything and organized it into folders, labeled and color-coded. She started noticing more than just patterns. She started seeing gaps in official stories. Local reports had inconsistencies. Police press statements left out details she had found in social media comments. And always, there was the silence that followed every victim's disappearance. No follow-ups, no answers. The case would go cold and people would forget. But Barbara couldn't. During the day, she watched Russell from a distance. She saw him drive his work van past the local schools, saw him park near walking trails with no clear purpose. He never stayed long, just enough to observe. She noticed how he blended in, always friendly, always helpful. The kind of man people trusted because he didn't set off alarms. But to Barbara, his normalcy felt rehearsed, practiced. It made her skin crawl. Her anxiety deepened when she realized something terrifying. All three women who had disappeared had used the services of RK Home Repairs within 2 weeks of vanishing. She confirmed this through subtle conversations and old work orders she accessed at the local hardware supply store, where Russell picked up materials. No one had connected the dots, not even the victims' families, but Barbara had. Still, there was nothing illegal about being near the victims, nothing that would hold up in court. So she started digging through more than just public records. She found old property tax files, scanned marriage and divorce documents, and even accessed an archived job application Russell had submitted years ago when he tried to work at a shipping warehouse in another town. That application used a different last name. Kane had apparently used at least 3 aliases over a 10-year period. It was becoming clearer by the day. Russell Kane wasn't just a drifter. He was hiding from something, or more likely from what he had done. Barbara's fear wasn't just theoretical anymore. She began feeling watched. Her mail was opened more sloppily. Her kids mentioned a man they didn't recognize asking about her at the library parking lot. And then one night, she noticed a dark van idling across the street from her house long after midnight. The headlights were off, and when she looked closer, she saw it was the same make and model as Russell's work vehicle. She closed the curtains and stood in the dark, heart racing. The fear she had been keeping at bay rushed into her chest all at once. This man wasn't just a theory. He wasn't just a name in a file. He was real, and he knew she was onto him. Barbara considered going to the police again, but she remembered the look on the officer's face the first time she mentioned her suspicions. Polite disinterest, a few nods, and a vague promise to look into it. They didn't believe her, and if they confronted Russell too soon, he might vanish like he always had. She couldn't risk that. She needed to be smarter, quieter. She needed to get ahead of him before he realized how much she knew. The next morning, Barbara made a decision that would change everything. She took a leave of absence from work, claiming stress and exhaustion. She spent the next several days going over her notes again and again, looking for the next move. That's when a disturbing thought occurred to her. What if Russell wasn't just watching her? What if she was already his next target? The signs were there. She fit the profile. A single mother. Independent. Recently showed signs of being alone, more often. It made sense. And if he was planning to strike again, he might choose her. That possibility shook her to the core, but it also gave her an opportunity. If he was watching her, if he was planning something, she could flip the script. She could take control of the situation, but she had to act fast. Any misstep could be fatal. Barbara began documenting her own movements and shared them in subtle ways online. Social media check-ins, vague posts that made her seem vulnerable or bored. She joined a few dating forums under a false name and waited. It didn't take long. A message came in from a user named Rick47. The photo was generic, the bio short and vague, but something about the writing style struck her. It was too careful, too measured, just like Russell's public persona. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she ran the profile through every reverse search tool she could find. The photo had been lifted from a plumbing company in Idaho. Fake. The IP address was masked, but the message's timestamp matched a window where she had seen Russell's van parked near the library. That was enough for her. Rick47 was Russell. Now she knew he had taken the bait, but this wasn't just about catching a killer. It was about survival. Barbara understood that she was walking into a game with a man who had played it many times before. Other women hadn't known they were targets. She did. And that, she hoped, would make all the difference. So she began planning her next move, not as a victim, but as bait in her own trap. Barbara knew that her survival, and perhaps the justice, long overdue for others, depended on what she did next. Every instinct in her body told her to run, to protect her children, to hide from the monster she now knew was circling her life. But the mother in her, the quiet but unwavering warrior she had become after years of hardship, refused to be afraid. Not anymore. She wasn't just trying to save herself. She was fighting for Hannah Wells, Julia Trent, Lena Monroe, and all the other nameless women who had vanished from towns just like Willows Creek. She began preparing in the most careful, deliberate way. Every move had to be calculated. Every interaction with Rick47 was composed to seem natural, flirtatious, and vulnerable. She created a persona that matched the kind of woman he'd likely prey on. Lonely, trusting, and slightly careless. She told him she was recently single, overwhelmed with raising kids alone, and desperate for companionship. She kept her responses slow and unpolished, not the sharp, methodical mind she was hiding behind the screen. It didn't take long for Russell to suggest meeting in person. He was cautious, never giving a direct name, always keeping the location vague, but he hinted that he had helped women like her before, and that he could make her life easier. The creepiness of his messages sent chills down Barbara's spine, but she remained composed. She suggested they meet near the forest trailhead at the edge of town, ironically the same trail near where one of the victims' cars had been found. She knew this would appeal to him. He liked secluded areas, places where screams would be swallowed by the trees. The day of the meeting, Barbara arranged for her children to stay with a close friend, under the excuse of needing some time alone to sort things out. She left her phone at home but placed a voice-activated recorder in her purse. She wore a small lapel camera hidden in the trim of her jacket, one she had purchased quietly online a week earlier. If something happened to her, she wanted evidence, left behind. But more than that, she wanted to capture what Russell was. She arrived at the trailhead just before sunset, the sky bathed in soft gold and fading blue. The trees stood still in the hush of dusk, their shadows long and heavy. She parked her car in a visible spot, unlocked the doors as if unaware of the danger, and sat on a bench near the entrance. She was exposed, vulnerable-looking, just as he would want her to be. Minutes passed. Then she saw it. The same white van she'd noted so many times before, slow rolling down the gravel path, its headlights off. It stopped far from her, hidden, partially behind a clump of trees. Her heart pounded, but she remained still. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out. Even in the dim light, she recognized him. Russell Kane, dressed in dark clothes, hands in his jacket pockets, walking with a calm, practiced pace. He looked exactly like someone who had no fear of getting caught. He approached slowly, cautiously. She greeted him with a forced smile, pretending to be nervous, uncertain, eager. He sat beside her on the bench, close enough that she could smell the faint chemical scent of cleaning fluid on his jacket. They made small talk. He was charming, in that unsettling, too polished way. He asked about her kids, her work, her loneliness, always circling back to what she needed, what she missed, what she wanted. She watched his eyes. They didn't blink much. They scanned constantly, her body, the trees, the trail, the parking lot. He was calculating, planning, and when he gently placed a hand on her knee, she knew. He wasn't just grooming her for something in the future. He was preparing to strike now. Barbara stood up, pretending to be flustered. Said she needed air. Said she wasn't sure if she was ready. He followed, not too close, keeping the illusion of patience. She walked slowly toward the trail, letting him come closer, waiting for him to make a mistake. Then, just as they were, swallowed by the trees, she turned around and faced him. She looked him dead in the eye and said a name. Hannah Wells. He froze. She said another. Julia Trent. His face changed. The charm dropped. The warmth vanished. And what remained was something dark and cold and soulless. She told him she knew everything. About Millstone. About the gas station footage. About the burner phones and the fake business names. For a moment, he said nothing. Just stared at her. Like a predator unsure if his prey had teeth after all. Then he lunged. Barbara was ready. She screamed as loud as she could, hoping it would carry to the nearby road. She fought, flailing, biting, kicking. The hidden camera recorded everything. The struggle, his threats, the violence. But she had one last defense, a small canister of pepper spray she had hidden in her jacket sleeve. She sprayed directly into his eyes. He screamed, stumbled, fell. She ran, heart pounding, lungs burning, crashing through the underbrush until she burst back onto the road. A passing jogger, hearing the commotion, stopped and called 911. Barbara collapsed beside him, gasping, blood on her hands from the fight, but she was alive. Police arrived minutes later. They found Russell disoriented, half blind, trying to wipe the burning from his face. He was arrested on the spot. In his van, they found rope, duct tape, gloves, and a knife. Enough to end any question of what his intentions had been. The investigation that followed was swift and damning. The footage from Barbara's camera made national headlines. Her careful notes and months of research painted a chilling picture of a man who had stalked and killed for years, hiding in plain sight. DNA evidence later connected him to the missing women. Buried in his storage unit were personal belongings of his victims, trophies kept like twisted souvenirs.